Well, hello, everyone. My name is Alison Woodall, and I'm a relocation specialist. That means I get to help you with the financial, logistical, and emotional issues that make moving to a new state so stressful. And today I'm talking with Tina Ross, and she is one of my good friends who has traveled and moved all over the US and is going to share her experiences with me. Tina, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
Well, so just to give a little bit of your background, you were in the military and you moved all over, and then you retired out of the military and you're still moving. So tell me a few of the places that you've lived and what you've loved about them.
Oh, goodness. So, as a 21-year Air Force members, we moved a lot of places, and sometimes we moved within the same state to different areas within that state just because we wanted to find better areas or just something different. So we have lived in Nebraska, Texas, Guam, which was really exciting. And now we live in Georgia, but we've also spent a lot of time in different areas just because of our temporary duty assignments. But those weren't like a lot of things that I could share with you as far as like how my family went through that, because we didn't always have the kids with us. So the main areas that we were with the kids was Nebraska, Texas, Georgia, and Guam.
Okay,
So,
and which did you like best of those states?
So I'm really loving Georgia right now. The weather is unbeatable. Like, you get 4 seasons, but you don't get all the mucky snow where you have to go out and shovel and freeze to death. And being from Nebraska, you know, when you go out in the wintertime, you breathe in, like your nose hairs freeze because it's so cold. So we actually enjoy the fact that there are 4 seasons here, but we don't have to go out and shovel and do all of those things. And there's just so much to do, and you're so close to so many different things. You can go to the mountains in Tennessee. You can go to the beaches in Savannah or even Florida. They're all within a like half a day's drive. So,
and I think so obviously we met in Atlanta. So for me, one of the big draws of Atlanta is the airport, where you literally can fly anywhere in the world, anywhere in the US so easily. Yes. It is a bit more expensive because it's a major hub, I've discovered, but that connectivity was a big issue for me. There are people in these groups who have thought about Nebraska. Would you ever move back there, having been there, or is the snow just too much of an issue for you?
So the thing I like about Nebraska is you get diversity. You get a lot of diversity in Nebraska, and it's that city feel without being so scary like a big city. But the problem with Nebraska is there's not a lot to do around that area unless you are like a hunter, or you like to fish, or you're you like the flat plains. You don't really care for like scenic areas and whatnot. It does have a lot of greenery and a lot of lakes, and the river is amazing. People are doing a lot with the downtown Omaha area. And Lincoln is a big city for like your college kids and stuff like that. There's a huge, with Nebraska football, obviously. So I do like Nebraska as a family area. So if you're not interested in like nightlife and I'm not saying they don't have it. I'm just saying that they're not as big on those type of things. They are very family oriented there. And I grew up there, and I grew up amazingly. Like, I can't imagine having grown up anywhere else. And a lot of my family still lives there. I love to go back and visit. One of the things I found about Nebraska is a lot of people that are from there, they are from there. Like, they grew up there, they live there, they raised their families there, their families raised their families there. So a lot of things stay in a small, I would say, worldview bubble, if you will. So they don't get to see a lot of the different lifestyles that you would have outside of that state. So it appears as though, this is life, like this is life, and there's nothing different from it. And sometimes when you have a little different perspective from other areas, they don't really understand that because that's just not what they're used to there. But they're very welcoming. I've never had any bad experiences there. So very diverse. Like I said, you'll find all different races, religions, backgrounds, all that fun stuff. And the zoo is the best. If you ever get a chance to go to the Omaha Henry Dorley Zoo, it's amazing. I make trips there on purpose. And I also love Vallis Pumpkin Patch.
when we talked earlier, we talked about how it's very easy to find somewhere that suits you when you're very clear on what you want. I know I couldn't move to Nebraska long term because I need mountains, I need scenery, and the Midwest doesn't give me that scenery. I also love that kind of cosmopolitan feel that you were talking about, where there's a big city within a couple of hours of you.
Right.
And how much does that, knowing very clearly what you want, impact where you go? Does it have a big impact for you?
It does, unless you like adventure and you're not trying to make like a large purchase. So one of the mistakes we made when we moved here to Georgia was we fell in love with an area, and it was because we were visiting there during a holiday. Maurice's mother moved here, which is my husband. His mother moved here with his sister and his niece, and we loved their little neighborhood. So we found a home within that same area. And we were like, oh my gosh, we love this. But one of the things we didn't realize was it was so far away from the city. And there were so many people that like were from there. They grew up there. So it was a little harder for my kids to really find that group that they fit in with, because it was always like, oh, you're kind of the outsider. We all grew up together. We formed these relationships. And, even though you're cool, we like you. They all had this history there. So it always kind of felt like my kids were on the outside of that environment. And one of the things we really didn't take into consideration was the fact that my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law and all of that, they are a predominantly Black family. There was no mixing there in their regard. But the neighborhood that we moved into, and I'm not saying that was the case, but it could be for some people. If you're mixed and you don't have that support system there, and you seem to be the only one, like one of these things is not like the other, you might feel a little uncomfortable. And some of the things that are happening, you may feel as though it's because of that. No one will ever truly know that that's the case, but you got to make sure that where you're going, there's some type of identification for you there. So moving into like a rich neighborhood was one of the other things that we did. We found an amazing house, and it was a steal of a deal. And we thought, this is going to be great for us. And although the neighbors were amazing, they didn't have people our kids' age. And if they did, they lived so far from our house. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go next door and play with the kids next door. So we had this big, amazing backyard with a pool and a hot tub and all the fun stuff. But we didn't have a whole lot of friends to share that with, just because people in that area were not our same demographic. So that's one of the big things that I think people should consider before they move somewhere. Are those demographics? Are the kids the same age as my kids? Are they the same, financial background type of stuff? Because if you move into some of these areas and you don't meet that mold, sometimes you can find yourself on the other side feeling a little left out.
Well, so because you've got 5 kids, so
I do.
Logistically, moving 5 children, each time you moved, did you kind of condition your kids? This is what we're going to do, and this is why it's going to be fun, or were they adventurous like you and just embraced the move?
So my older 2 kids were in the military with us. So they kind of served as we served. And so I was in for 21 years. My oldest son is 24 and my daughter is 21 now. So that's all they've ever known is the moving aspect. So a couple of things that they didn't like was, oh my gosh, I have to leave my friends. I have to leave, my favorite room. I love this part of the house, or, whatever. And it was just one of those things. Hey, you know what? Let's go find a house that we're all going to pick out together. You can choose your own room, and let's see what we think about this other place. And did you know that they have this there? And it was just getting them excited and not showing them some of the fears and concerns that you maybe have, because as parents, we always worry about things that don't even necessarily have any impact on your move whatsoever. And we have to realize that as we're sharing those concerns openly in front of our kids, it will affect them as well. But if you're excited, they're going to be excited, and you'll find creative ways to make them, just as excited. And a lot of times what we would do was we would say, you know what, let's sell your old bedroom set and let's get you a new bedroom set, or something to make the move feel more exciting. Or, when we get there, we're going to get you a bigger bedroom so you can have a better Barbie doll house. So you just got to find something that will make them excited about the move, whether you talk about some of the things that there are to do there. Like Atlanta was an easy sell for my kids, because as military family, we didn't have our own, blood related family there with us whenever we would move to a new area. So that was one of the sellers was, hey, we got grandma there, we got your auntie there, your cousins are there. And then the other big seller was, oh my gosh, they have like the aquarium there. We can go to games, and we're this many hours from the beach, and just stuff like that. So they were like, oh, that's going to be so exciting. And, it kind of pumped them up for the move.
Yes. And I think, because I did exactly the same. My husband always jokes that I'm very good at brainwashing my kids, but it doesn't often take a lot to get them excited about things. And then while I never shared, our big concerns, I did also talk with them about, well, how, when you get to a new school, how can you make new friends? And each time we've moved, I've said, well, what did you learn when you went to that school the last time? What would you do differently? And my daughter, who's a lot more reserved than my son, she said, well, I wish I'd talked to more people. I wish I'd just put myself out there. So in terms of, I could say, well, I've moved my kids, all these times and it's so damaging to them. I choose to look at the positive and say, well, my daughter's more outgoing. My daughter makes friends more easily. And it's also telling them how you condition them. So my son, as far as he's concerned, he sees a new school as an opportunity to meet 1,000 more kids.
Right. And the kids are going to latch on to whatever you have as an emotion about the move. And that's the biggest thing that I found. And the funniest part was my poor daughter, she started here in Georgia as a sophomore. So in high school, it's like one of the hardest things to start over and not have that niche of friends with you, because high school is scary as it is. And when you don't have those people that you grew up with to kind of go with you, it makes it an even scarier place. But for my daughter, the first thing I did when I got here was I went up to the school, and it was during the summertime that we got here. And I had spoken with the coaches there for the cheerleading squad. And I said, I know that you guys already had cheer tryouts and things of that nature, but I want to meet you. I want you to meet my daughter. She's amazing. She's a cheerleader. Is there any way that you can give her an opportunity to try out and see if she, she could be a good fit for your team? So she tried out, they let her do it. She did amazingly. And so we ended up having her on the team. And then the minute I knew she made the team, I said, hey, let's invite the whole team over for a big slumber party. And there was like 30 girls. And I was totally up for the challenge. I was like, let's do it. And so she invited all of them. And, we ended up having to have 2 separate ones because half the group could only come on this day and the other half came on this day. But through that, they got to meet not only Alicia, but they got to meet Alicia's family. So then that made them excited to hang around with her more, because it seemed like, oh, your mom is fun. She's cool. We can come to your house and, and have a good time and things of that nature. So that made them more willing to come over and get to know Alicia and our family as well. So, and for Darius, it wasn't that hard. It was like, hey, Darius, there's some boys next door playing football. You want to go play? And he was younger. So I think he was in 3rd grade when we got here. He was going into the 2nd or the 3rd grade. So it was easier for him, and then our girls were little, and that's how we got to meet you. So that was their first opportunity to be away from me, because I retired right before they ever had to go to daycare or anything like that. So that was their first opportunity to be outside of my arms, was when they came to you guys over at Cannon Church. So.
And I think as parents, we have to be brave ourselves, because we connected because you were just there talking to everybody. If you'd kept quiet and not made it very clear that you were brand new to the area and you were looking for fun people to hang out with, I wouldn't,
right.
if you just kept to yourself, we wouldn't have, become friends.
Exactly.
And I always think when you move somewhere new, you have to break into that circle of people. When I moved to California, everything was shut down. And the only place that I could go to find people was a gym. And we were working out in a parking lot with everything was on fire, and there was ash literally raining down on us, and it was 100 degrees. But I knew that was the only place that was open that I could go to meet people. So I just, put myself out there.
When I was younger, I would always feel uncomfortable in public spaces and with people around me. And I would always see like these angry faces and these mean faces, and it made me extremely uncomfortable. So what I ended up doing is, through that discomfort, I would start talking, or I would make reference to something that we both were thinking. I'm that person who's always saying what others are thinking. And I try to keep it within a PC realm, to where if they're not feeling the same way as I am, they'll still talk to me about it. And we can be on opposing sides, and it won't be one of those, oh my gosh, I just created an awkward situation type thing. And I started to find that as I would talk about, like, being in line at Walmart is one of the worst things in the world. I would talk about a product that was on there, and I'm like, wow, it's a good thing that I'm not on a diet or anything, sitting in front of all this chocolate. And then somebody in front of me would be like, right? Like, they got to put this stuff right here. And so then we would start talking. And so through that, I would see a lightening of the face, and I would just get a little bit more comfortable. And then I would start chatting. And it's so funny, because I actually ended up making several friends from Walmart, just talking about random stuff like in the store. So it's just making light of situations, makes you more comfortable, and it gets you to know the people in front of you, and you don't feel as, alienated or scared or whatever. So that's one of my coping mechanisms, if you will.
And I think when you move to a new state, whenever I'm coaching someone, I always talk about how you're still going to be the same person at your core, but it's your chance to reinvent yourself and really play up your strengths and all those things that you're not sure that you really like about yourself or you want to try and improve. Nobody knows what you were like wherever you lived before.
Absolutely.
Who you are now. And it's a great chance to reinvent yourself. I always say, because I grew up in England, you know, only my friends in England know what I was like when I was younger. People here only see me now. And the person that people see in California is different to the person I was in Georgia. I'm still the same person at my core, but I don't volunteer for anything here. Yet in Georgia, I was like room mom and church person. Right now, I'm in that phase of my life where it's all about my career. And so when you move, as long as you're very clear on what you want from your life, and you're prepared to put yourself out there, you will find what it is that you want.
It's so funny that you say that, because we just made this major move from the suburbs of Atlanta, and we lived in Snellville, which was a small town, great area. It's, you know, very, very family oriented there. You know, the crime is low, all that fun stuff. And we moved to the city, and my son was so scared. He's like, Mom, I don't know if it's a good idea for me to start high school, because he's a freshman this year. And he was really, really nervous. He was like, I do not want to start high school in the city. Like they're tough out there. You know, I'm going to get beat up because I'm small. I'm this, I'm that. And I said, buddy, all these kids that you went to junior high with right now saw you when you were in that awkward stage of your life as a, you know, elementary school student trying to figure out he has ADHD. So he was a little hyper, and he would just be like the super goofy kid, you know, doing whatever. And he was small. So he was not like getting the girls, because they saw him as this silly, goofy little boy. And when he went to junior high, it was like, oh, he's that kid that we can tease and pick on because he was silly and goofy. And now he's in this new high school, and he's gone through puberty, and he has a mustache, and he has this amazing hair. And I'm like, dude, go in there and reinvent yourself. Do not be silly and goofy unless you feel comfortable around those people that you can be silly and goofy with. So they know that that's not what you're all about, but they know that you have that capability to do that. But just be in the moment, like wait and see what makes you feel best about who you are, because you can be the super intellectual person. You can be that super cool, you know, I love hip hop or whatever. You can be all these different things, and you don't have a tag on you because they don't know who you are. And so he is thriving. When I tell you thriving, that boy is TikTok famous right now. They're like, oh my gosh, who's this cute, light skinned, curly haired kid with this big, bright smile? And he's riding that wave all the way through. He dresses to the nines. It was so hard for us not to get him to go. I'm like, you can't go to school wearing that. It doesn't match. And your shorts are too small. And now I cannot make him put on something that's ugly to save my life. So he's reinventing himself, as many of us should.
So when you moved with the Air Force, I know that they help you a lot. How is it different moving not in the Air Force versus being in the Air Force?
So I think the difference is it's going to depend on whether or not you get someone to move you or you move yourself. Moving yourself is a huge headache, but sometimes people do it so they can save money. And I totally understand that. Every time we do it ourselves, we always say, we're never going to do that again. I'm never going to do that again. And then we did it again. So this is the second time we did it again. And one of the lessons learned from the previous time that we did it was go through every single room in your house. If it's something that you haven't used, if it's something that you're never going to use again, and you're just using it as a keepsake, take a picture of it. Take a picture of it, unless it's really, really one of those things that you have to like keep because it's like a family heirloom or something like that. But it's one of those, you know what? I don't really need this, so we need to get rid of it so we can condense things. Because what you do is you end up traveling with all of that, and then it just accumulates. Everywhere you go, you grab more stuff. So then it just becomes this huge nightmare monster that you're just like, oh my gosh, how did we get all of this stuff and we don't even use all of it? So I would definitely encourage going through each room and figuring out, you know what, I'm not really attached to that. I don't care if this goes on to the next house, and having a yard sale or having, you know, putting things on Facebook Marketplace and stuff like that, and making some money off of the things that you don't really need or use anymore. And then it makes it a little easier. And then, you know, doing it in chunks. So that way you're not like rushing around at the last minute, and then you're having to like force stuff into boxes that you really don't, you know, when you're unpacking stuff, you're like, why did I pack that in this box? That doesn't make any sense. So that way you have like a system, you know, starting with one bedroom first, and you're just working on it at a little bit at a time. So the difference between the military moving you and you moving yourself is you have people that are laboring for you. One of the things I hated about the military moving you is they did pack everything, literally from Guam to Texas, we had our trash packed. They actually wrapped it up, packed it. They packed it in the same giant crate that our couch was in. So our couch had this horrible stench for the longest time. And we finally just was like, I'm getting rid of this. It smells awful. I don't even know if something laid eggs in here and it's going to do whatever. So the difference is you have a little bit more say over what's happening with how things are being packed if you do it yourself. So.
Okay. And so you love Georgia. Georgia's your kind of place that you're going to stay for a while. Were there any places that you moved that you didn't particularly like and you wouldn't go back to?
So there were some areas in Texas where it was a small, I'm not going to name any cities because I don't want anybody angry with me and being like, that's my hometown. There were some areas in Texas that we weren't super hyped over. We were forced to be in a small area in Texas because of our military position, and it was not very diverse. So our kids had a hard time when they were going to school. They would have people ask them silly questions just because they were one of the only few mixed kids in the school. And this was 20 years ago. So I'm sure it's probably different now, but in that small area in Texas, it was all the kids kind of had the same mindset as their parents because their parents were openly sharing their opinions. And it was right around the time frame that Obama was first in the running for president. So my kids were being really, really chastised for being mixed and for, my daughter would get asked every day, is your hair a wig? How's your hair straight this day, but it's curly another day? Is that horse's hair? Stuff like that. And so it would really like break her spirit. And I just had to tell her, baby, you've got like the best of both worlds. So don't worry about what they're saying. They just don't know any better because this is all they know. They don't realize all the things that you guys have already done. And you're amazing. Like they just moved there from Guam and they had this whole big experience where Guam was really neat because you had like islanders out there from smaller outlying islands and they would come in and it was a very homey family feeling. And when you would go to the beach, there would be people next to you and they were like, hey, come on over and join our barbecue. We're just out here at the beach having a good time. And that was very different than the reception that they got when we were in Texas. So I felt kind of bad for them. But once we moved to bigger cities in Texas, it was a little less of a problem. So I would just be very cognizant of those smaller towns that have older generational folks in there, because sometimes their worldview is very obscured because they don't get out of those smaller cities and they continue to have some of those old school mindsets that carry on to their children and their children's children and so on and so forth. So we would go to lunch with our kids and it's so funny because we would get this long stare back and forth from the kids across the table. And they would look at my husband and they go, are you her daddy? And he would go, yeah. And they would ask me, are you her mommy? And I'm like, I sure am. And they were like, but he's black and you're white. And I'm like, that's why they're brown. Have you ever mixed a brown, like a black and white color together? You get brown. And they were just like, oh, both of my parents are white. And I'm like, I know. So it was just one of those things where I would accept it because they were children and I had an opportunity to educate them and to teach them that it's okay to be curious, just be respectful.
And I think, it all goes back to being very clear on what you're looking for from your community. If you have a diverse background, you probably need to find a community that is more diverse because you'll just feel more comfortable. I mean,
don't be looking for those super small towns because they're going to have super small town mentalities as well. And the news is like their only, hey, I've seen this on the news one time, and the news doesn't always give us the best of all those worlds that they're trying to bring forth.
But for a Californian who maybe, doesn't have much experience in the South, overall in the South, if you pick the right town, you've not found any issues?
I would just go closer to the city, and they're very accepting in California. And I love that about California. And it's not like that everywhere you go, but you will find your tribe if you're looking for that right area. So you really got to do your research and try to find out what type of things are happening there. If it's new and it's exciting for you, you just have to be ready for that adjustment period where you're going to be in a situation where not everybody thinks like you and moves like you. And that's okay. You just have to show them who you are. And then it's a whole educational thing where you're like, well, I'm military and this is my background and this is why I don't move like others that look like me or, act like or think like others that look like me. And so it's one of those things where you're going to have some patience and acceptance to the things that are happening around you.
Any other guidance that you would give to someone who is looking to move from California to, to a different state?
So California is a tough one because that's where I want to move. But it's so expensive there, and it's just really, really tough to get in those areas where you can feel comfortable and still be financially stable there. And so I really applaud those who've been able to live out their lives there. But the one thing I will tell you is there's a great big world out there, and don't be afraid of it. Challenge yourself to find something new and exciting and say, I did that. And here's the thing, you can move and hate it and go right back to where you were, and you're not going to lose anything. And that's one of the biggest things that I would share with anyone who wants to try something new. Don't be afraid. Like, we just sold our perfect house. Our house was perfect. It was the right size. It was the right shape. It was all the things, but it just didn't feel at home to me because my kids didn't have anyone to play with, because it was like too much of a big house area where you don't have a lot of kids in there and stuff like that. And I was like, you know what, even though I love it here, my kids aren't happy. And so I need to find something different. And so we were like, let's sell it. Like, let's just sell it and see what we come up with. And we don't know where we're going. So we got an apartment for now, put all our stuff in storage, and we're really taking our time, and we're getting a feel for those areas. We're driving through them. We talked to some of the neighbors. We're like, how do you like it here? What's it like over this way? And they're like, oh yeah, we have lots of kids. We do this on the weekends, and stuff like that. And it lets you really get a feel for if that's going to be your vibe or not. And a lot of times you can just feel the vibe of an area when you get there, and you can just feel it shift. Like, very much for you guys, it's different when you go to Newport Beach. I think it's called Newport Beach, versus walking in Santa Monica Pier. You feel a difference in that vibe, and you're going to know, hey, this is a vibe that I feel like I can work with, or it's just not going to work for me. And I would encourage you to seek them out before you make that change, because you don't want to be locked into a house that now you have to sell, and you don't know for sure if you're going to make money on it because you haven't lived in it long enough, or whatever the case may be. Just don't make any rash decisions, but don't be afraid to make a different change.
Yeah, what great advice. And the scary part when you leave a state and you go across the country, because a lot of people I work with, they're moving from California to Georgia or to South Carolina or North Carolina, and that's a huge move, and it does feel like there's no way back, but there's always a way back. You may not go back into the same house, but right. you can if you hate wherever you move to, you can move to a different place within that state and find somewhere that too. Perfect. You don't have to go necessarily back where you came from. Mm-hmm. And now, thanks to Airbnb, you can actually do like a midterm or a long-term rental. So now I think you'll have inspired an awful lot of people. And I very much appreciate you sharing all about, your experiences. Now, you have a TikTok channel. Can I link to your channel?
Absolutely. We have so much fun on our TikTok channel. And that's kind of what I was telling you. My son is TikTok famous. I just put him on blast on there all the time. So it's Bossy Rossi 7 with an IE, BOSSIE, ROSSIE, and the number 7. And you can also follow our family adventures. I just started a YouTube channel. It's called RossVegas. It's RossVegas. And we just post some of our family adventures on there and just show people, like, we are the family that people are like, oh my gosh, you guys are so brave. And it's really not. We're not brave at all. We're just not, we're not scared to try something new, and we're still scared while we're in it, but it's just like, hey, whatever it is, it's whatever it is, so let's go and figure out what this is like. And if we didn't like it, that's not what we're going to keep doing. So we'll do something different. So people are like, oh my gosh, I wish we could be like you, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, don't say that, because we make a lot of decisions that we regret later. But and regret's a bad word. It's a very strong word. I don't regret anything I do, because everything that I've ever tried in life has either taught me something, or it's brought me somewhere that I needed to be at that time, or it's made my kids find something new that they're like, wow, if you never did this, I would have never X, Y, or Z. So don't be afraid.
I so appreciate you talking to me. I know you'll have inspired an awful lot of people. And check out Tina's YouTube channel and her TikTok. And thank you so much.
Thank you. So fun. Thank you.